Hello and welcome to Collaborative Conversations. This is the fourth episode. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4. This would be the fourth episode of season 2. I am the host, Dave Plow, and I'm joined by
Dr. Barbara Maxwell. I'm the director of the IPE Center here at Indiana University.
And today we are doing part 2 of not our interview, actually your friend Ted Meyer's interview with our patient advocate, Rick Phillips.
Yeah, and Rick shared so much wonderful information and insights in the first podcast, and it will be wonderful to hear him continue and give more depth and more kind of his personal story, but also his incredible insights. And with Ted, who is an absolute master at drawing those insights out. So I'm really looking forward to part 2.
Yeah, so am I. I say so am I like I haven't heard it. I was there for the interview. I was privileged to be there while they were speaking, producing this episode. And one of the things that it struck me about this episode, I say struck me, one of the things that's very interesting about this episode is that in the first part, we got a lot of Rick's story, like history type stuff. In this episode, we hear a lot more of the experiences that he's had with his own care. Ted is very good at drawing people out, getting them to talk about their own experiences, and that's what we get in this part. So it's an exciting episode. You're going to learn a lot about the patient experience if you've never had it. Rick is very good at putting you in the patient's shoes, speaking from the patient's perspective. So it's a very in-depth, great look at what he's experienced and how it could affect you if you were in a similar situation. So with that, we're going to let Ted and Rick take it away, and we'll see you at the end of this conversation.
So you've had treatment like over such a long period. Do you have any good stories of like really good care where doctor was really listening to you, or really bad? Because bedside manner is important, and dealing with your patients as human beings and not lab results is important. So maybe you could toss in a little advice and tell us a story or two.
I have 2, one of each.
Okay, let's hear.
My endocrinologist, I had diabetes for, I would say, about 40 years, and my care had been spotty, and I had not seen an endocrinologist. My primary care physician retired, and he said, you've got to go get an endocrinologist. He made a suggestion of a couple I should probably check into. So I looked up the one that was nearest my house, and I called, got an appointment, and I went in to see him expecting to hear just a broad attack. Why haven't you been here? And why aren't you doing this? And why aren't you doing that? And this was a very experienced endocrinologist. And we sat down in his office. He pulled out my chart, got everything out. He said, you are doing a remarkable job. We could do better, but you on your own are doing a remarkable job. And I want to tell you, that moment sealed the deal. When he acknowledged, even though my care was spotty, even though my numbers weren't great, even though I'd never seen him before, when he said, you are doing a remarkable job, I would have followed that man to the end of the earth, and did. He retired. I have a new endocrinologist, but that simple statement turned me from being like this against advice to being like this, open and accommodating. I tell him, I say, you have no idea what that meant to me. And he really didn't, because that was just his nature. That's just what he did.
When I talk to med students, I always talk about like making sure they pick the right specialty for their personality. Like if they're people that run on adrenaline, they shouldn't be having that conversation with you.
Right.
They should be in an emergency room, patching people up and going home and having a beer,
Right.
So let's hear your bad story.
Well, the bad one. Bad one happened twice. I had to have back surgery. So I was being handed off to the hospitalist at my hospital system, which is always scary for a person with diabetes who uses a pump, particularly when that person knows that they are going to be on very heavy narcotics for a period of time. And it scares me to death to think that I would have control of the pump in that moment. So, twice I went to the hospital. I insisted that I meet the hospitalist. I told them I had type 1 diabetes. I showed him my pump. I said, now, when I come out of surgery, you will have control of insulin. And this is my carb ratio. This is how we operate. I realize you'll do injections, but you will have control of the insulin. I have this major surgery. I get back up to the room.
How long were you under anesthesia?
Yeah, 4 hours or so. I get back up to the room, and for 2.5 days, there is no insulin because he was treating me as a type 2. And in his mind, if my blood sugar was 3 to 400, I was fine. Because as a type 2, you will adjust and we will eventually bring it down. It's not a big deal. Well, I'll tell you what, for me, it's a big deal. I keep my blood sugar, I panic if it gets above 150. And I watch it every moment of every day. It is a very big deal. I just couldn't believe it.
Did you call them out afterward? Did you say, hey, I
Yeah.
gave you specific instructions and what the hell?
I had to call my endocrinologist. And I said, listen, I've been here 2.5 days and I don't have insulin. And she said, oh, well, I'll get that fixed. And she did. She transferred care and put me on a regime that worked. And I was so appreciative. Well, about 4 years later, that back surgery had to be revised. I went and again, I talked to the hospitalist, same guy, and I told him, look, this happened before. We do not want to let this happen again. And I have type 1 diabetes. I normally operate this pump by myself. The only reason I'm giving it up to you is because I'm going to be under the influence of a narcotic and I don't want to be responsible. So I had the revision surgery and it was a couple of hours and get back to the floor. Almost an entire day passes, no insulin. Again, I have to call the night service, my endocrinologist, and say, I called him at home and said, listen, I'm not getting insulin. And he said, well, you're in the hospital. You should call the hospital. I said, the hospitalist won't give me insulin. He thinks I'm a type 2 and he will not give me insulin. Well, 2 or 3 calls and they were giving me insulin. Now, that is pathetically bad. And this is a trained hospitalist person. This person has been around hospitals for a long time, but it's a basic misunderstanding of the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes and a basic misunderstanding of what a pump does and the impact it can have on a person's life. I told him, I said, I won't heal. This surgery will not heal if I don't get my blood sugar down. And he said, well, you can worry about that when you get home. Well, I'm going to worry about it right now because I'm panicky about it. I don't think that I'm going to collapse and die because of high blood sugar. Because if you're not giving me insulin, I'm not eating anything. And I'm trying to float through until I get the heck out of here.
Yeah.
I will never give up my pump again. It will never happen again.
The whole idea of this talk is to talk about interdisciplinary care. Is that just bad communication? I mean, you were very clear. Was it bad communication between the workers at the hospital, or should your endocrinologist have stepped in first? Like, where did it go wrong, do you think?
It went wrong in the system. The system was wrong because my endocrinologist is associated with that hospital system. And it seems to me that when a long time person with type 1 diabetes comes into the hospital, the endocrinologist in the hospital system should be allowed to manage the day-to-day insulin on the floor, as opposed to turning it over to a generalist who has no understanding of diabetes technology and really type 1 diabetes. We're a subset of the diabetes community. There are about 1.5 million to 1.7 million people with type 1 in this country. We are a subset of the larger diabetes population. We understand that. But we are also experts in us. And that's the other thing I tell my doctors. You are my consultant. I view you as my consultant. You have a special role to play. Your role is to advise me, and your role is to write prescriptions and do procedures. My role is to tell you how I'm doing and if I will agree to do the medication and the procedure. But make no mistake, I'm going to run the show. I'm not going to try to usurp what you do because I can't do what you do. I need you, but you need me. And we can only do this when we work together. And I think that's a fundamental shift between what was occurring in the 70s and 80s to what I think is standard of care for today. It's the same way with arthritis. My doctor and I talk about the newest medications that are in development every time I see her. We talk about what I'm taking, how I'm doing, and then we talk about the rumors of medication. We talk about clinical trials. We talk about methods of administration, both today and future. And we think about rheumatoid arthritis 18 months in advance. And I need her to do that. I need her because that's how we're going to make rational decisions.
So I presume you have two teams. You have an arthritis team and a diabetes team. Do you get them to communicate?
Not very often. It's almost impossible. I actually have two others. I have four. I have chronic kidney disease type 3A, which is the first part of being really concerned. I also had open heart surgery back in 2005. So I have a heart team. And then, honestly, I have a psychological team. They're all connected in the same hospital system. They all work for the same employer, but getting them to talk to each other, that's impossible.
Do they at least all know what drugs you're on from the other
Yeah,
teams?
yeah, they do.
That's a start.
Yeah. And I try to be very careful as to who comes on, who comes into that mix. I always ask my current doctors that I love who they would recommend, because I know if they recommend them, then that means that they have had interactions with them, and that's an extremely positive thing. And then I try to interview my doctors before I select them. Again, this is a partnership. They have very highly valued skills that I can't have. But as I said, I have skills that they can't have. And it's when we match those skills together, when we get them to come together, that's when we get the best treatment.
So have you rejected anybody that you've interviewed? And if so, why?
Yes, I rejected two rheumatologists. My longtime rheumatologist left practice, and I went to three offices to talk with rheumatology doctors. I rejected one very highly skilled, very highly recommended rheumatologist. I rejected her because of the way the office was run. When I went in, it was during COVID, and the people at the front desk were talking about other patients, and I could hear the other patients' names, and I could see that they were not interacting with anybody with a mask. And I met with the rheumatologist, And I told my wife when we left, I said, I cannot come here because the doctor needs to understand that when you walk in the lobby, that is the first major interaction you have with that doctor. And that receptionist, the person booking or the medical assistant, they are more important on a day-to-day basis than the doctor.
Yeah. I yeah. I'm always amazed when I go to, the hospital in LA because it's not unusual to be in a waiting room with somebody famous, if they're not real famous, and they just sort of come out and yell their name and it's a name you recognize and you're thinking like, what about HIPAA rules? What about...
Uh,
So you've got 50 years of experience. What would you say to some kids now? They just find out they've got diabetes and they're worried about their future. You can be the old sage and give some great advice. What would it be?
3 things. First, find a partner. Find somebody that, be it a parent, a girlfriend, a spouse, a boyfriend, find a partner. Find psychological help early. You will not think you need it, but you will. Diabetes in particular is a long-term, long-run disease. It will not probably, in most cases, take your life, but it can make your life miserable. So what you need to do, in my opinion, is you need to deal with the psychological, social aspects of it, even though when you're first diagnosed, you do not think you need it. It is wise to begin to talk to somebody to let go of that pressure because you're looking at a 50, 60, 70-year run ahead, and you can't contain that discomfort, that mental, emotional discomfort for that amount of time. You just can't do it because it just keeps getting tighter and tighter. So it's better to get help early and to find an outlet so you can release it. That's number 2. Number 3, this is not track meet. It is a marathon, and you need to run it like a marathon. I know a family, a mom, a single mom with a young man who is in high school now. I met him when he was in grade school. His mom was troubled by the pump because it kept beeping and it would interrupt his life and interrupt her life. And they asked me what to do because both of them were so frustrated with the pump. I said, turn off the damn alarm. We need to understand that a high blood sugar can be corrected with insulin. We know the cure. We know how to correct high blood sugar. We know how to correct low blood sugar. But the automation that we have is to be a tool to help us. It's not the end all. She said, well, when we go to the endocrinologist, all the numbers are there, and the endocrinologist looks at it, and I feel like they're passing judgment on our management. I understand that. But if the numbers are high or the numbers are low or the numbers are wacky, that's a matter of treatment. That's not a judgment on you. That's a judgment on the treatment. We need to think about it that way. We need to think if something's not right, then we have to think about it in terms of how can I improve the treatment, not how can I improve the person. The person, believe it or not, will grow into the treatment goals. One of the best things that somebody ever told me, they said, when you are sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, you will take care of your diabetes. And that's true. When you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, you manage your blood sugar a lot tighter.
Well, I have one more question. Since you're back in school and you're studying to be a
Yeah.
pastor,
Yeah, I'm a lay minister at our church, Disciples of Christ congregation in Carmel, Indiana. I decided that I didn't know enough about doing that, so I went into a lay minister's program. It's much like an associate's program. It's a 3-year program, and it's tougher than what it probably sounds. It's tougher than I thought it would be.
Well, let me ask this question. So I'm always amazed by people with a lot of illness or have had bad accidents or things that find a lot of strength in religion, because I'm atheist and I tend to just think this is my lot in life and I do the best for myself I can, and when it's over, it's over. And I have friends that have been through horrible, horrible things, losing limbs and terrible strokes. And if I was them, I would think, oh, well, God, where were you? So you have a myriad of things going on and you're looking for God. So maybe you could talk to me a little bit about the difference in our attitude and your attitude.
Well, I think the most fascinating question in theology right now is, why do bad things happen to good people? That is the question that I wish to pursue after I graduate. Now, I will tell you how I answer that question. And I answer the question like this: why not? If type 1 diabetes only affected people who murdered, then we would not have insulin pumps. If rheumatoid arthritis only impacted people who steal cars, we would not have these big drugs. If ankylosing spondylitis only impacted people who jump out of second-story windows because the police are chasing them, we would not have these drugs. So why not? Why not me? God never gave me a promise that I would be healthy. God gave me the promise that I could serve others. And it's that service that drives me. And as I say, when I think about these big diseases, my first question is, why not me? What would make me any better than the guy walking down the street who committed a crime last night? What would make me any better than anybody else? I find great comfort in religion, and I find great comfort in knowing that I can communicate with God and not feeling control, but feeling like I have a advocate outside of myself. That's very important to me. But to me, the central question is, why not me? Because nothing makes me any different. I want to know what the other great religions in the world, how they answer that question, because I think that is the central theological question for people with chronic disease. Why do bad things happen to good people? And I think that how the major religions answer that question would be very insightful.
All right. I'm ready to read your graduation thesis.
And that is all for Ted's conversation with Rick. I want to thank Ted for doing this, even though it's remote via Zoom. He is on the other side of the country speaking to someone here, so time zones matching up. It took a little bit of work, but thank you, Ted, for being flexible and getting this going. And Rick, again, thank you so much for working with us and helping us and just providing your expertise and your experience for this conversation.
Yeah. And as we said at the beginning of the episodes, the whole purpose is to hear the stories of real people engaging in collaborative work, or real people who benefited from or who have not benefited from collaboration and action. And so to hear Rick share, success stories of things that worked well and things that didn't work well, experiences that were not so good. Those of us who work in healthcare really try our best to do our best. But one of the things we often fail to do is attest to the expertise of the patients themselves and to really, truly engage them in their own care. And I think what Rick has shared is a really strong testament to how important that is.
Again, thank you both so much for doing this. It was great to get those insights. And if you want more insights from either patients, students, providers, faculty members, whatever. You can follow us on LinkedIn. We share as much as we can. Any information that our department is able to put out gets shared throughout LinkedIn. It also gets shared on our website at ipe.iu.edu. We want you to just come, join the conversation, basically. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here on this episode, and we will catch you on our next episode as we speak with Dr. April D. Newton and Jody Miller about our Cycles of Addictions program. So thank you.
Yeah. And you won't want to miss it. It'll be great.